Hi, I'm Jamal Simmons. This is Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast where we highlight the strength of our city, the spirit of our people, and share your stories of compassion. All right, Jamal, thank you so much for making some time for us today and for joining the Compassionate Las Vegas podcast all the way from Washington, D.C. So my first question is a hard one. It's a heavy hitter. It's loaded. Who are you and how do you define compassion?
Well, first of all, thank you, Chris, for having me. It's a pleasure to even be asked to do something like this. And I'm glad you're getting this podcast off the ground and it's moving. I think people are going to really enjoy it. These are the kind of topics that everybody, people think about. They don't always necessarily talk about them out loud, but it's kind of something that rumbles around inside of our brains and so in our hearts. So I'm glad to be a part of it. I got involved in politics really right after college. And the reason why I did was because I wanted to be able to have an impact on the world. And I thought a little bit about becoming a college professor. And so that was the way I thought that I was going to be able to do that. And then I started working on political campaigns. And I saw the impact of how not just the policies that politicians are able to put in place, but really how like the inspirational part of politics can have a way of moving people to do something bigger. So I worked for Bill Clinton when I first got started, and younger people, it's hard to remember, but Bill Clinton was sort of the Barack Obama of his era. Like, he was like this young candidate. He had this wife who was professional. That was very different, back in the 90s, to have a wife who worked outside the home. They had this young daughter. He was on MTV. All these celebrities were around all the time. And so one of the things I saw was how people would react when they would come in contact with them. And then I was with them when they were at the White House and the administration in DC, and we would bring people to the White House. And the fact that you could take, some young person and take them to the White House and they would see that and become kind of inspired by it. And then, I was in DC all the way until Barack Obama was president, and I helped Barack Obama win his election. And so I spent a lot of time at the White House and doing some informal advising of the administration. And so I would see, particularly the way young people of color would see Barack Obama, and we really moved by him. I mean, one of the most inspirational pictures of President Obama is one where he's sort of leaning his head down in front of a little boy who's touching his hair because he wanted to see if it was like his. And you think like, I grew up my entire life before, I was in my 30s before there was an African-American president, and never really thought necessarily there would be one. And all these kids who grew up in an era where having a Black president doesn't seem to be something that exceptional. It seems to be pretty normal. So when I think about compassion, what I think about is it's not just the processes of government and politics that matter, it's the people who are in it who matter. And so as the people who help execute the laws or doing things not just because they are expedient or they're the thing that you're supposed to do, but doing them because they're the right thing to do, and because they're the right thing for people and they're going to make somebody's life better. To me, that's what matters the most in politics.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that background is so important. I love that picture that you mentioned. It still gives me goosebumps when I think about it, how impactful it was just to see someone like yourself in that position. I want to back up for just a moment. And you mentioned compassion in politics, but how do you actually define compassion?
So I think about it a lot with empathy. We have to be able, we don't have to do anything. Hopefully one is able to put yourself in the place of another person and see what is happening in their life and how that thing is hurtful or matters to them. And then trying to either help make a bad situation better, a good situation great, or if they're having pain, maybe even offer some comfort, because you can't necessarily always get rid of the pain. And sometimes it's not really the right thing to do to get rid of the pain, but helping them see the light outside of whatever they're going through to whatever the next thing is. I have a saying in my life about embrace the sunrise. And that, if you see a picture of the sun sitting on the sunset, sitting on the horizon, you don't necessarily know if that sun is going up or it's going down, right? It could be sunrise or it could be sunset. But unlike Mother Nature, which tells the earth which way to go and the sun, if it's going up or going down, in our lives, we have the ability to decide what we want to see happen. God gave us free will. And so we got to embrace this as a sunrise. We got to look at it as a place. And when the sun is rising, it's not kind of a Pollyanna thing. It's like the sun rises, it's the day is beginning. It's an opportunity to do work. It's an opportunity to make something better than it was the day before. So for me, compassion is one of those things where you want to make someone else's life better than it was before, not just be focused on your own.
I love it. And so we're going to hashtag that, embrace the sunrise. How about that?
I love it.
Good. So I kind of want to dive into, I guess, maybe some more sensitive subjects. And one of the reasons I really wanted you on the podcast instead of just one of our local strategists or something here is because these matters are so close to home that I don't know if our audience could really hear one of their officials say some of these things, because politics is complex. Governing is complex. Can you just make kind of these situations simple for us? Make it plain. How do you govern when there are no good choices?
The truth is that's really like fundamentally the art of particularly high level governance. President Obama used to say all the time that by the time a decision arrived at his desk, all the easy stuff was done, right? They only left the big hard things to do for him. And I think that's true of most leaders of any organization, not just the president. But if you run an organization every day, I've run companies, I've run nonprofits with people. I advise leaders in my consulting life. That's what I did. I advise leaders from like T.D. Jakes, the pastor, to presidents, to people who run organizations, companies, and the easy decisions get made fast, right? Like somebody can make an easy decision. The cashier at the grocery store can make a decision about what to do with the person who just spilled milk on the counter, right? That's not a decision that makes it to the CEO. The decision that gets to the CEO or the branch manager is the one that's hard that they can't figure out on their own. So I think you do think about it from the perspective of what's best for the person involved, people who are involved, what's best for the organization. And if you're the leader of a political organization, what's best for my city, my county, my country, right? And sometimes those things are not together, like they're in conflict. So but your responsibility as a leader of a group, whether you're a parent in a family or you're a leader of an organization, is to do what's best for the whole. That you can't always divorce yourself from that. Sometimes it is the right thing to do to take a risk on behalf of the whole for an individual. But that's not always true. And so sometimes what you have to do is kind of take the pain of saying there's going to be an individual who's hurt here, but all of us are going to be better off in the end. I'll just give you an example. It's like if somebody gets taken hostage in a country, right? You may risk some group of soldiers and military people to go rescue that person, knowing the 10 people you send to go rescue could also be in danger. But it's more important for us to get that one person back, or at least try to get that one person back, even though we're going to risk a larger group of people. The needs of the one sometimes outweigh the needs of the many. Wow. But sometimes the needs of the many have to be preeminent. And so you decide, you got one person in your family who maybe they need $1,000, right, to like solve a problem. But if you take $1,000 and give it to that person, you also need to pay $1,000 to pay your mortgage, right? So you can't have your family be without a home so that you can help one other person solve, a problem they have that costs $1,000. They have a bill that's due, a credit card bill or something, or a tax bill that's due, that's $1,000. So they're going to have some short-term pain, but it's maybe not right for you to like have your family be homeless in order to solve their short-term problem. And that's the thing, I think, as being a leader, you sometimes have to make a tough call that you can't do something for the individual because you've got to be worried about everybody.
So what I'm hearing is really you have to make sure your home is secure before you can really extend compassion to others, because compassion is something you kind of do, right?
Yeah, I did I have a podcast called, or it's a Instagram TV and Facebook show called This Is FYI, and I interviewed the other day somebody who was a therapist, and they had a good example on this. They said, it's like when you're on an airplane, and the one thing they tell you when you get on the airplane is in case of emergency, the oxygen mask will drop from the top of the plane. Put your oxygen mask on first before you go to put the oxygen mask on help the person who's next to you, right? You can't really be of service to that many other people if you also are the one who is in jeopardy. And so I think you have to find that balance of, sometimes there are moments for heroism, right? And you're willing to sacrifice that, but in general, you've got to secure yourself so that you have the ability to help other people. And you can do both of those things sometimes at the same time.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, for sure. In fact, one of the things that I work on helping people to better understand is a lot of times what's best for the individual is having a stable collective.
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next question, which is, how do we balance individual liberty with collective compassion?
This is like, you're like taking me all the way back to like philosophy class, right? Like,
I'm a philosopher. What can I say?
these are the big questions. I mean, there is that fundamental thing, and certainly in broad democratic philosophy, which is your right in at the tip of my nose, right? So you can do whatever you want until it begins to impact me, at which point then we have to have some conversation and negotiation. So you can swing your hands wildly, which is fine, you're human, but if you're swinging your arms, hits me in the nose, that's a problem because now I'm negatively impacted. So people do have this liberty, or the idea of you can't scream fire in a crowded movie theater, right? Because you're going to endanger everybody who starts to stampede toward the door. If there is no fire, you should not be screaming fire and causing that kind of damage. So I think in general, in economics, they call it, these negative externalities, right? Like you can have a house and you can do whatever you want with your house. Nobody cares what you do on the inside of your house, right? Your house is fine. But if you live on a block where all the houses are gray and white and you paint your house purple and green, your purple and green house is going to have an impact on everybody who lives on your block, because now what was normal about your block now has, or what was consistent about your block is now inconsistent. Now people may decide, oh, it's fun to have a purple and green house in our block, have at it. But you probably can't make that decision by yourself. It's a decision you have to make, with other people.
Here in Vegas, we know all about that because we have HOAs that govern every detail of how we live. So we totally get that example.
Totally. So, I mean, that's the thing where, maybe the part of that is, you can kind of have your personal liberty, but when it starts to encroach on other people, that's the place where we kind of have society or even government. And, Thomas Paine, who's one of the founding father thinkers of the country. And Thomas Paine wrote 300 years ago, almost now 250 years ago, that, society is kind of is a product of human benefit or human benevolence, right? Government is a product of human failure, right? So we come together in society because there are things we want to accomplish together, right? I'm a farmer, you build houses, somebody else takes care of children, somebody else can do something else well. And so each one of us does the thing that we do well, and collectively, we're all a better society. Government is the kind of thing in this thinking that comes about when we have a failure, right? Well, society can't solve a problem. It's to punish somebody who commits a crime. It's to make a decision that we can't work out on our own, but or it's too big of a decision to work on our own, right? A decision between 4 people on a block or 10 people on a block could probably be resolved in that block. A decision between 1,000 people in a city probably can't be resolved by just a conversation. You need something else to come in. There's like a failure of the collective to reach a decision. So we have to come up with some rules that govern our behavior so that we don't end up in fistfights on the street, right? And so in that way, there's a way for us to come up with a better decision as a group because we've decided, and it's representative government. So it's our block picks one person to go, your block picks one person to go, and instead of 1,000 people making a decision, now you have 15 people making a decision. And that's a much easier process to manage than 1,000 people trying to hash it out on their own.
Yeah, for sure. So how does compassion play into that? Can politics actually be compassionate? Is that even possible?
The best politics have to be compassionate at some level, right? I mean, I think it's a lot of what we look for in leaders. I think people want strength, they want vision, but they also want compassion, right? I say like a lot of times they want leaders who are exceptional, but also accessible, right? Like you kind of want to feel like this person is stronger, better, more attractive, like whatever. There's some part of it that you want them to be better at than you. Celebrities, they're more attractive, they've got better acting skills. But then we also like it when a celebrity's playing with a dog, right? Or like a celebrity is like cuddling their child, because we want them to feel accessible. And I think in politics, you want to do the same thing. Sometimes you got to make tough calls that are going to be really hard, but then also you want to go in and hug people, who are having tragedy, or we just had the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing 25 years ago. And, one of the things that I remember from that with President Clinton was he was able to go into that community. And I mean, literally, sometimes you just hug people and just hold their hands, and you want them to know like it's going to be okay. And so we want leaders who are going to be both compassionate, I think in a small way, and compassionate in a larger way. And that, like Katrina happens, we see people who are in jeopardy and they're dying. We are going to marshal the forces of America, of our country, to go and rescue these people who are in jeopardy in this community. And I think when that doesn't happen, or even let's make it smaller, we both grew up in Detroit. If there's a snowstorm in the city and we can shovel out our sidewalks, and maybe we can shovel out our street, but we can't shovel out every major street in the city. So the city has to come and do it. And what you find is when mayors don't shovel city streets in snowstorms, that is the number one thing that can kill a politician, is not taking care of people and rescuing them at a time of need.
Absolutely. That is so true. Of course, we know nothing about snow here in Vegas because about it, we shut down. So I want to ask this and kind of turn the conversation a different direction for a moment. How can we as the governed, as the citizens, as the people, show more compassion for our elected officials?
I think the thing to remember, again, I've been around politics my whole adult life, and I was around it even as a kid because, my family was involved in it, is these people they're people, they're people just like we're people. They have things they're afraid of, things they hope for, people they love, crises that are happening in their lives. Sometimes there's not always a big conspiracy that's taking place. Sometimes someone said to me, never underestimate the amount of human, I'm going to say this a nice way, screw ups. Like people just screw up sometimes, they just they make the wrong decision, the wrong call. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be held accountable for it. And by that, I mean, take responsibility, maybe apologize, and then take some action to fix the problem that you've caused, right? And then maybe it's so big that we don't want you to take action because we need to swap you out and put somebody else in to do it. But we shouldn't necessarily look at them as being bad and evil people. There are really bad people who are up to doing really bad things, and they're using the political system to do that. But not everybody in politics is doing that. And not everybody who makes a decision you don't like is doing that. And that's why I think having a broad look at the breadth of the decision making that they're doing and see whether or not over time, they tend to be trying to operate from a good place. I'll tell you, I mean, George W. Bush is somebody, I think Katrina was a really bad moment for him and it kind of ended it for him. But I think in general, George W. Bush seemed like a good person. He just made some bad decisions. And I think that's very different than maybe the current president. I've been trying to keep from being political, but the current president, who it just doesn't seem like he's based in any values that any of us would recognize as the kind of things that we would want the young people in our lives to emulate. Generosity, kindness, compassion, thoughtfulness, being able to see beyond your own personal need at a moment and see what the broader group needs. I mean, those are the kind of things we're used to seeing from leaders. And I think that's what people are looking for in general.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the challenges that this podcast seeks to address. It feels as if the world is kind of going that direction because you see those type of protests online and those are the loudest voices. So we really seek to amplify hope and share the stories of compassion because this is what's really happening. This is the majority here. So how can we bridge even in those conversations and be less polarizing? Of course, we know that just demonizing the other side simply, first of all, it's not who we are as a people, but it also doesn't work. So how can we have these conversations from a political spectrum where we do move the ball forward?
You know, I have been wrestling with this recently. Prior to the COVID outbreak, I would have told you that I thought social media was going to be the death of society. And that's a new place for me. But I think the way it's been hijacked by people and it's been used it's like social media in many ways has been bringing out the worst parts of us and giving a global platform for all the things about humanity that we're trying to get past. But now we see in this crisis, it's like social media, like this conversation we're having right now, technology is facilitating goodness, right? This is facilitating families being able to get together and have talks that they didn't have. It's facilitating last night we were on Instagram listening to two musicians try to have, kind of a fun battle back and forth with each other. DJs who are playing party sets and you find out 100,000, 200, 300,000 people are all listening to the same music at the same time and enjoying themselves. So, I think now we're seeing the benefit of it. But what I'll say is there are people who do hijack technology to try to do bad things. And we look for somebody to police it. But what I'm getting to the conclusion is that there is no police, right? There won't be a police officer to come in and say, you stop doing bad things because you can't act fast enough. So it's almost like what we need are benevolent gangs to counter the malevolent gangs that exist. Those of us who are rooted in faith and rooted in some broader sense of purpose and compassion have to go and group together with other people who have the same values and philosophy. And we have to go enter public spaces and spread love, as the word would say. Like we got to spread love and compassion in a new way. That's not just listening to letting the bad actors have the floor. Like we got to fight for that microphone and take it back and then use it. I mean, think about what Dr. King was doing in the 60s. It was based in love, but it was aggressive. It was in your face. He made people confront things they didn't want to confront. He used the technology of the time he was in and said, television is the new technology that's moving people. Let's create images that are going to bring out compassion and love and force people to face up to the bad things in our society that they want to ignore. And I'm going to use these images to make people face up to that. And maybe that's the role of compassionate actors in this moment, is to not sit back and just, kind of wrestle, but do things like what you're doing, where you're actually entering the space to put more goodness out into the world and take away some of the negativity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's so important. And I go back to Dr. King quite frequently. And, my Instagram feed is full of quotes from him and all of that, because he did seem to get it. even as a pastor, he still understood, like, I've got to be vocal in these spaces too, because what happens in the government affects my people, and not just his people, meaning his congregation, but his people as the human race. So I think that that's important to highlight. You reminded me of Marianne Williamson.
You just said something about, this idea about faith. And, one of the things that's happened is you can't go to church, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't be in these big collectives. But now we go to church online, and it's almost like that used to kind of have like a little bit of a stigma, right? Like if you were at Bedside Baptist or the Church of Sealy and Saint Sealy and Serta, like you would get people would kind of clown you a little bit, right? But in this moment, for the people who don't necessarily get up and make it to the chapel on Sunday morning, we're all kind of having this experience where we're finding ways to engage and have these faith experiences, even though we're in our own homes. It's almost like, in a way, when you read stories about the early Christian church, or even like the Jewish church under times where the Jewish synagogues under times where they were under assault, people are like huddling together to like nurture their faith in a way, and it's probably making that faith stronger, because instead of it being so big, it's like really small and intimate, and it gives us a chance to kind of connect in a different way. So this, again, is one of these moments where I feel like technology is actually facilitating something good and not just amplifying the bad.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And it's hard for me because I do need that physical touch, those hugs and all of that. And of course, there are the physiological benefits that come from that. Mm-hmm. And I am so grateful to have this technology to still be connected in new ways with, a family Zoom every Sunday and things like that. It's amazing the things that are happening because of it. But one of your earlier points reminded me of Marianne Williamson and her candidacy for president or nomination. Talk a little bit about that, because she was a voice that I thought was unique in the sense that she didn't have a traditional Christian perspective. And most of our presidents, or probably all, have been Christian, but she still spoke from a place of love and really brought some new conversation to the table that we're still having today. What are your thoughts on that?
So I will tell you, I know Marianne a little bit. I talked to her right before she started to run for president. She actually gave my son a little lovey, like a bunny that he sleeps with every night. He still has it. And she's the real deal in this sense, which is that I think she really believes what she says. She wasn't into running for president to try to play politics. She really wanted to like spread love, like to put this in there. She believed that we as a society were, we needed a reckoning. Like we needed to kind of reckon with the demons amongst us, in our psyches. And I think, to get out of her head for a second, but I think that this is right. And there's a part of me that wonders, from just a theological, cosmic, whatever perspective, this is kind of like the universe fighting back against us, right? If this COVID is kind of the universe fighting back, because it's making us take time to think about it. Even like the earth fighting back, right? Because we're questioning this climate change. And now, like, airplane travels dropped 80%. Factory outputs have gone away. You can see, in Venice, they say that there are fish in the canals. In China, you can see Beijing from outer space for the first time in decades. So in some ways, it's like it's forcing us to all stop and have some sort of a reckoning with wherever we are. And so the question becomes next is, what do we do next, right? Like, okay, if everything lifts tomorrow, what do we do? Do we just go back to the way we were? Or do we try to take this time to think about this, what Dr. King would call the benevolent community? Like, do we try to create the world that it is that we want to see exist? And I think that this is the moment to start pushing those questions. Like, okay, what do we have when we come back? What kind of economy do we have? How do we interact with each other? What are the systems that we're going to put in place? So hopefully we will spend more time doing that.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think that you're right. This is our moment to really make some radical shifts. and not just some incremental, okay, we can fix this, we can patch this, but we can really actually bring our system to 2020. Like this is not the ice age anymore, so we can do that. I want to thank you for your time, for your insight, your wisdom in this area. Before we go, I want you to tell us, because you mentioned you had a podcast of your own. Tell us where we can find you and how we can get connected.
So if you go to Instagram, my page on Instagram is at Real Jamal Simmons. That's the same one on Facebook, Real Jamal Simmons. And the podcast is called This Is FYI. So it's hashtag This Is FYI. But you can go to either one. You can go to my pages on Instagram or Facebook and find it. But everything is hashtag This Is FYI. So hopefully people take a look at it. And I just call it, they're short conversations with people who know things. So, people have questions and I have questions. And so I ask people that I know to come talk about them and tell us what they know. Hopefully it's useful to people.
I love it. So in summary, how are you embodying compassion in this world today?
I try to be, generous with my time and my attention. And my time, frankly, is the most valuable thing that I have right now, because I've got 2 little kids, I got a wife, I got jobs that are demanding. But when I'm out and I meet people, when I was in college, happened to me the first time, I ran into somebody who was a civil rights leader that I studied in school. And I went up to him and I said, I was super excited. And I was like, hey, good to meet you. I go to Morehouse College and I study you. Blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, I don't have time for this right now. And he turns around and he went out. Right. And it was one of the most impactful moments of my life, because I vowed that I would never be that person. Right. And so I really do. You can't always spend 30 minutes with somebody, but it doesn't take you like more than a minute to say, it's very nice to meet you too. I'm running something else. But tell me, like, what's your name? Where are you from? Tell me what you're up to. It's great. I'm sure, I hope you're going to be successful. Like, send me a note on Instagram or something. And let's, I hope you follow. Like, just say something and then keep going, right? Like, it's 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes. You can keep moving. And so I think it's just a level of being considerate of where other people are. And I just remember so vividly wanting to get somewhere. I remember so vividly not having money, not having access to people in power, not having a chance to do the things in my career that I thought I wanted to do, and wanting to do those things. I was working in a restaurant, bussing tables and hosting and I remember and dreaming about what I wanted to be. And so I always try to put myself back in the perspective of that person, that person inside of me who was trying to get somewhere. Whenever I encounter somebody who I think is also trying to get somewhere, what would I have wanted somebody to be and how would I want them to be? So that's just a small way, I guess, of doing it. The broader ways are, the work I do, the people I work with, the kind of consulting that I did in my past, like the conversations I try to bring to the forefront in media. But I think we also have to do it in small ways, as well as, we try to be helpful in church to people and all that stuff.
So you just gave us a great compassionate practice to try for ourselves this week, which is just give someone a moment of your time and attention. You never know what impact that can have. So, again, thank you for being on the show today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Treat others how you'd like to be treated. And that's the golden rule. Camp Anytown has taught me that knowledge is power, and if I utilize my voice, I can make a difference in the world, no matter how big or small.
I learned that as long as we stand together, we can accomplish so much more.
What Camp Anytown has taught me is that I am not crazy to think I can change the world. I'm crazy if I think I can do it alone.
Camp Anytown has taught me that just because I'm different does not mean I don't belong.
I learned at Camp Anytown to be more compassionate, because you never know what somebody else is going through.
Camp Anytown is a no-cost youth leadership camp that trains high school students in diversity, community, and inclusivity. When you choose the Golden Rule license plate, you play a part in a local camp that helps shape a better tomorrow. Learn more at dmvnv.com.